Hi everyone, and welcome to your free Ornament Girl tutorial. My name is Kennedy, and in this video I'll be showing you how to make the basic star basketball ornament pattern. Make sure you check out the link below the video to get your free printable supply list that we've included with this pattern. A quick reminder before we start, this pattern, along with all Ornament Girl patterns, is copyrighted, and it's illegal to distribute or teach it without our permission. If you have a friend you think might love to make this pattern, be sure to send them the link to this video. Let's go over all of the materials you'll need, and then we can get started making your ornament. In order to complete this pattern, you'll need a soft foam ball divided with 4 lines. If you aren't using a pre-marked soft foam ball from the Ornament Girls shop, you can check out our video for dividing your ball into 4 segments. You'll also need satin straight pins, fabric, black pins and sequins, some thin pieces of cord or trim to make the lines on your basketball, ribbons for making your ribbon bows. I'm keeping these ribbons neutral to match my basketball embellishments, but you can feel free to use ribbons in your favorite basketball team colors. And finally, you'll also need a few ornament making tools. Be sure to check out the link below the video to get your free printable supply list so that you can see all of the correct measurements and quantities for your materials. Once all of your tools and materials are gathered, we can start creating your basic star basketball. Before we add any fabric to our ornament, I'm first going to mark the equator, or this mold line that's running around the center of my ball. This is optional, you don't have to mark this, but I just like to darken that equator because it helps me keep my eye on it while I'm adding my pins, and it helps it to show up better in the video. And if your ball isn't already pre-marked into 4 segments, you'll want to check out the video for dividing your ball into 4 segments now. I just realized that when I marked my equator, I accidentally actually marked one of the segment lines, but since this ball is divided into 4 segments, it all works out the same. So I also just made a little X at my 2 pole markings to show where my segment lines are intersecting. Once all of those marks are made, we can start adding some fabric. The base pattern of this basketball ornament is the basic star pattern, so we're going to be using basic triangle folds to cover the entire ball, and then we'll turn it into a basketball using our embellishments. So to create your basic triangle fold, you're going to start with a 2x3 inch rectangle of fabric. Mine has the same pattern on both sides, but if you have one pattern side, you're going to hold your piece with the pattern side facing away from you. Now fold the top edge over by about 1/4 inch, but you don't have to be exact about that amount. Fold in half the opposite way and crease to find the center. Unfold and place a pin along that center crease just a hair below the top folded edge. Now this prepped piece is going to be pinned into the foam right at the pole markings. So that is one of the points on your ball where all of your segment lines are intersecting right here at this point. And I'm gonna pin right into that point, maybe even slightly above it, just to make sure that I have enough fabric to fill this entire segment for this first layer. Now you wanna make sure that your center line is right in the middle of that segment, and you're going to fold the left side straight down and fold the right side straight down, just overlapping the left side enough that you could use one pin to hold both halves in place. And now you're going to swivel this on the pin so that the triangle is sitting centered inside the segment, and each edge of the triangle is laying right along one of the segment lines on the foam. And now you're going to pin at the bottom center to hold both halves in place. Smooth the left side out and pin at the corner. And smooth the right side out and pin at the corner. And that is how you make a basic triangle fold. We'll be using that exact same fold to create this entire ornament. So let's go ahead and prep another piece of fabric. With another 2x3 inch rectangle, hold this horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you, and fold the top edge over by about 1/4 inch. Fold in half the opposite way and crease to find the center. Unfold and place a pin along that center crease right below the top folded edge. Now we're going to move directly across from the triangle that we just placed and do the exact same thing. We're pinning right there at that pole marking where all of the lines intersect. Fold the left side straight down and the right side straight down, and now swivel your triangle until it sits centered within the segment and you have a triangle edge touching both of those segment lines. Now go ahead and pin at the bottom center, smooth the left side out and pin, and smooth the right side out and pin. Go ahead and prep another piece of fabric in the exact same way. And now we're going to fill in these final two segments. So you're going to pin right there at the pole marking, create your basic triangle just the same way. And when you center this within the segment, you want to make sure there aren't any foam gaps showing in between your triangles. If you have some foam showing, you might want to move your pin upward a little bit to make the wider part of your triangle move up so that you can close some of those foam gaps. Repeat that exact same process one more time to fill the final segment on your foam. Once you've added all 4 basic triangles, layer 1 is finished. Just like I said, the entire ornament is made up of this exact same fold, just placed in different places. So we'll go over how to prep your piece of fabric one more time, but just know from here on out, you're going to prep all of your pieces the exact same way. With a rectangle of fabric, hold this horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you. Fold the top edge over by about 1/4 inch. Fold in half and crease to find the center. Unfold and place a pin along the center crease right below the top folded edge. And this is how you'll prep all of the pieces for the rest of the ornament. Layer 2 is going to be made up of 4 basic triangles placed right on top of the basic triangles from the previous layer. So you're just going to measure from the tips of these triangles, which is also right there at the pole marking, down along the center of the triangle, and you're going to pin your prepped piece right at the 3/4 inch mark, right along the center line of the triangle from layer 1, right at the 3/4 inch mark, so we're pinning 3/4 inch below the tip. Now create your basic triangle fold, folding the left side straight down and the right side straight down, just overlapping the left. And you want to swivel this so that the line is centered and pointing straight up, even with the center line of the triangles from the previous layer. Now you're going to pin at the bottom center, holding both halves in place, and pin the left and right corners down. It looks like in this layer, my corners are approaching the equator. So I'm just going to mention now, you always want to keep your pins right above that equator. You don't want your pins going over into side 2. Your fabric might overlap that equator a little bit, but you're going to keep your pins in a nice straight pin line just above that equator line. Prep another piece, and moving directly to the left of the piece you just placed, we're going to repeat those exact same steps. So here we're on a new triangle from layer 1. We're measuring down from the pole marking along the center line of that triangle and pinning your prepped piece right along that center line at the 3/4 inch mark. Create your basic triangle fold. And now swivel this so that it is pointing straight up and in line with the center line from the previous layer. Pin at the bottom center and pin at the left and right corners, keeping those pins right above that equator line. Repeat that exact same process 2 more times to add your final 2 triangles of layer 2. Once you've added those 4 new triangles, layer 2 is finished. You can go ahead and prep another piece in the exact same way to start layer 3. And now layer 3 is going to be pinned between the triangles from the previous layer, and this is also between the triangles from the first layer, and these are going to land right along our segment lines. So you're measuring down from the pole marking on this line between triangles instead of on the center line of the triangles. And again, these are going to be pinned right at the 3/4 inch mark. So 3/4 of an inch away from the pole marking, right on that segment line and the line between triangles. Create your basic triangle fold. And now when you swivel this, you just want to make sure that that center line is in line with the segment line and the line above. And you can also make sure that these little corners created by your overlapping triangles are symmetrical. You can see that if your triangle was off center, you'd have a tiny corner over here and a big one over here. So you just want to try to make sure that those look pretty even. And again, you're going to pin at the bottom center and the left and right corners, keeping those pins right above that equator line. Prep another piece. And now moving directly to the left of the triangle you just placed, we're working between the triangles from layers 1 and 2. So we're skipping over this triangle here and working between the next set. And you're going to measure down from the pole marking along that line between triangles and the segment line on your foam. Pin right at the 3/4 inch mark. Create your basic triangle fold. And before you pin, you're just going to make sure it is all lined up with the lines above and below and centered so that your little corners of overlapping triangles are symmetrical. And when you pin, you want to keep all of your pins just above the equator. Repeat that process 2 more times to add a basic triangle between the remaining 2 sets, pinned 3/4 of an inch from the pole marking. Once you've added all 4 triangles, layer 3 is finished. Go ahead and prep another piece so that we can start layer 4. And in layer 4, we are going back to pinning along the center lines of the triangles from layers 1 and 2. So you can see that the outermost triangles, the ones that overlap the most, are the ones that we just added. We're going to be pinning in between those. I know it can get kind of confusing when they're all the same color. So these outermost triangles are the pieces you just added. We're pinning on top of the triangles in between those. And again, we're going to measure by 3/4 of an inch. So from the tip of the triangle from layer 2, you're not measuring up here from the pole marking anymore. You're down here along the tips of the triangles from layer 2, measuring along the center line. You're going to pin at the 3/4 inch mark, and you're going to make your basic triangle. making sure that the center line is lined right up with the line above it and that those little corners made by overlapping triangles are symmetrical. And this time, all of your pins need to stay right above the equator. So I'm following my equator here, and I'm gonna pin at the bottom center, but I'm keeping my pin just above the equator. And you can even peel your fabric back to sort of see where the pin lands along that equator and move it if you need to. And now when you pin the left and right edges, you wanna keep those right along the equator as well, or just above it. And we're just going to repeat that 3 more times to finish off layer 4. So let's prep another piece. And now moving directly to the left of the piece we just placed, we're skipping over the triangle from layer 3 and returning to a triangle of layer 2, measuring down along that center line and pinning at the 3/4 inch mark. And now create your basic triangle fold, keeping your center line lined up with the layer above it and keeping those overlapping points as symmetrical as possible. And then pin at the center, right above that equator line, and the left and right edges. Repeat that exact same process 2 more times to add a basic triangle pinned 3/4 of an inch away from the tips of the triangles from layer 2. Once you've added all 4 triangles, we can trim away the extra fabric extending beyond the equator. Just carefully trim off all of this fabric so that we can keep an eye on the equator a little better for the last layer. Once that is all trimmed up, layer 4 is finished and we can move on to the final layer to complete side 1. Go ahead and prep another piece to start layer 5. Layer 5 is going to be placed right on top of the triangles from layer 3. So these are in between the triangles that you just placed. So these short little triangles down here that you trimmed off at about halfway, those are the triangles we just placed. We're working right in between those. And you're going to measure down from the tip of the triangle from layer 3 along that segment line and pin at the 3/4 inch mark. Create your basic triangle, keeping it centered with the triangle above and the segment line below. And when you pin at the center and the left and right edges, you're going to keep all of those pins right along that equator line. So in that same pin line that we've been adding at the edge of this trimmed fabric. Prep another piece, and moving directly to the left of the piece we just placed, we're going to find the next open triangle from layer 3 and measure down by 3/4 of an inch and pin and create your basic triangle, keeping it lined up with the triangle above and the segment line below. And keep your pins just above that equator. Repeat that exact same process 2 more times to add a basic triangle on top of the triangles from layer 3, pinned 3/4 of an inch below the tips, and these are going to land right in between the triangles that we placed in the previous layer. Also be sure to keep all of your pins just above that equator. Once you've added all 4 triangles, you can carefully trim away that extra fabric extending beyond the pins. Once that is all trimmed up, layer 5 is complete, and that also finishes side 1 of the ornament. Side 2 of the basic star is completed the exact same way. So I'm just going to show you each finished layer so that you don't have to go through the instructions for each layer again. I'll show a condensed version, but if you want the breakdown of each layer, you can go ahead and return to the starting point of layer 1 from the first side. And if you start not being able to see your segment lines, just remember you can use the center lines of the triangles from the previous side to line yourself up. So I'll show you each completed layer here, but if you want to go back in the video to see more of the breakdown of each piece, you can go ahead and do that to complete side 2. Layer 1 is made up of 4 basic triangles. These are each pinned right at the pole marking, and they're centered within the segment. So the edges of your triangles should be lining right up with the segment lines, and there should be no foam gaps showing between the triangles. Layer 2 is made up of 4 basic triangles pinned right on top of the triangles from layer 1, 3/4 of an inch from the pole marking, and you can keep this center line lined up with the triangles above and the triangles below, and your pins right above the equator line. Layer 3 is made up of 4 basic triangles pinned in between the triangles from layers 1 and 2, and pinned 3/4 of an inch from the pole marking. Be sure to keep your pins right above that equator line and use the lines from the triangles on the opposite side to help keep these lined up. Layer 4 is made up of 4 basic triangles pinned between the triangles that we just added, right on top of the triangles from layer 2, keeping those center lines lined up all the way across the ornament and your pins just above the equator, and you can trim off that excess fabric extending over into the opposite side. And finally, layer 5 is made up of 4 basic triangles pinned in between the triangles from the previous layer and on top of the triangles from layer 3, keeping all of your center lines lined up across the ornament and your pins just above the equator. Go ahead and trim off that excess fabric extending over into side 1, and with that, side 2 is complete. Now we'll add a band to cover all of these raw edges and pins. With your 2 by 10.5 inch strip of fabric, you're going to hold this with the pattern side facing away from you and fold it in thirds lengthwise. And you might not be able to fold the entire piece at once. That's okay, we can start by working with just the first few inches. And now you're going to flip this over so that the seam is facing away from you, and you are going to decide where you would like the top of your ornament to be. I suggest lining up the top of your ornament with layers 1, 2, and 4. So from my center here, I'm following this section where I have 3 layers, and right there at the top center, I'm just going to lay my band with the raw edges facing down and use a couple of pins to hold it in place. And now, keeping your band folded in thirds, you're going to wrap this all the way around the ornament, covering those raw edges and pins as you go. And once you return to the starting point, you're just going to overlap that first raw edge of your band just a little. Use 2 more pins to hold this band in place at the top center, and then trim off that excess fabric. And now it is finally time to start turning your basic star ornament into a basketball. You are going to start with an 11-inch piece of the ribbon or trim or cord that you're using to make the lines on your basketball. I'll show you a few different options here. For this first basketball, I used a wide flat trim. For this second one, I used a cord, so this is more rounded cording that I used to create the lines. And for this video, I'm going to be using 1/8 inch wide flat satin trim. So I think that the cord might lay a little better, but I wanted to try out this ribbon because I think that might be what most people have on hand. So starting with your 11-inch piece, you're going to start this right at the top center where the band is starting and stopping, and you're just going to place one pin. And now we're going to use the lines of our basic triangles to bring this ribbon right down the front center all the way around the ball. So I'm just following this straight line created by my triangles all the way around until I return to the top center. And you can pull it pretty tight so that it lays flat and stays in place. And every trim you use is going to behave a little differently, and that's okay. You can just work with it until it looks how you want. Now I'm going to pin it back in place at the top center and trim off the extra. Now we can add some black pins to help keep this in place. You can add these black pins wherever your ribbon needs help lying flat or staying in place. I'm going to show you where I like to add mine, but you can add extras or move them around as you need depending on how your ribbon or trim is laying. So I'm just going to add one at the tips of these triangles that are closest to the band. So I'm just lining up my ribbon there and using a black pin on these triangles that are closest to the band here. Just to help hold it in place. And I'll do the same on the other side. All right, and now we've added our first line. And now we can add our next piece. So you're going to need your other 11-inch piece, and this is going to create another line all the way around the center going the opposite way. But this time we need to decide which side we want to be the back of our ornament. So if there is a side that's not as nice or it looks a little bit messed up, you can choose to make that side the back of your ornament. And it'll still look good from both sides. The back side is just going to have the sequins to cover the starting and stopping points of these ribbons. So where this ribbon is going to start is going horizontally right there at the pole marking, and you're going to overlap it with that first ribbon. And I'm saying ribbon, but you could be using trim or cord, whatever you're using to create your basketball. You're just going to pin it right there at the center, and again using the lines of those triangles, wrap it all the way around the opposite side and return to that starting point. But this time when we pin it again at the starting point, we want to cover up any of the raw edges. So I'm actually going to thread a black pin with a large black sequin, and I'm going to pin that right there at the center. And before I press it down all the way, I'm going to move that sequin out of the way and just trim away the excess ribbon there. So I'm just trimming that off, and then I can push my sequin all the way down, and now the raw edges of that ribbon are hidden underneath the sequin. And again, we can add some black pins to help hold this ribbon or trim in place. You can add yours wherever they're needed, but I'm going to add mine along the black trim on top of these basic triangles that are closest to the band here. And if it helps, you can add one at the very center where those ribbons are crossing over each other. And now we can start adding the curved lines for the basketball design. So with another piece of your ribbon or trim, you're going to line this up vertically. The end of it is going to land at the back along the horizontal piece. So I have the top of my band here, looking at the back of my ornament. The end of my ribbon is going to land right on my horizontal piece, but when it goes up vertically, it should be hitting the tip of this basic triangle right here. When you move out from the center, the very next basic triangle should be how far over you move that ribbon. So you can pin the end in place. And when you come up to the tip of that basic triangle, just add a black pin. And now that that black pin is there to hold the ribbon in place, you can curve it diagonally. And you're just going to follow the lines of these basic triangles all the way to the front of the ornament. So I'm going across these diagonal lines, crossing over the band, and following the diagonal lines of the basic triangles on the front of the ornament. And I'm not pinning all the way down here at the center. I'm pinning right at the tip of this basic triangle that's just one layer out from the center. Pinning in that basic triangle, coming straight downward to the basic triangle tip that is just below. And you can leave a little bit of a curve in your ribbon if it'll let you. Pinning at the tip of that basic triangle down there, and then curving and just following these diagonal lines again to the back. I'm just going to move my pin up a little so I'm right along those diagonal lines. Curving back, following those diagonal lines to the back of the ornament, pinning at the tip of that basic triangle, and then coming right back down to the starting point. And this time, again, we're going to use a black sequin to cover up the raw edges. So if you want to just trim your ribbon so that it lands right there at the same point where you started it, I'm going to trim it, get rid of that excess, and now use a black pin with a black sequin to pin that in place, covering the raw edges right on top of those ribbons. And for this, I probably could have used smaller sequins. When I was using a bigger trim, I definitely needed those large sequins to help cover up the raw edges. And now we just have one more piece to add. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side, and you can see how this basketball is starting to form. So now on the opposite side, we're going to start our ribbon right in line with the tip of that basic triangle that's just one layer away, and pin in place on the horizontal piece. Come right up to the tip of that basic triangle that's coming in diagonally from the left and add a black pin. And then curve this over to the left, following the diagonal lines of your basic triangle, crossing over the band and following the diagonal lines on the front of the ornament as well. Add a black pin to the tip of that basic triangle that's just one layer away from the center. Come straight down to the same layer below and add a black pin. And you want to look at the front. See how these aren't really symmetrical over here? I'm just going to move this over a little so that they're a little more symmetrical. And then curve this back along the diagonal lines, returning to the back side of the ornament, adding that black pin. And then when I come up to the starting point, I'm just going to trim my ribbon so that it is just the right length to land right there on that horizontal piece, and then use a black pin threaded with a sequin to hold that end in place. Now you can just take a look at your basketball and see if there is anywhere that you need to add additional pins to help your ribbons lay in the pattern that you want, keeping them a little more symmetrical. I'm going to add some extra pins to help bring these ribbons in toward the center. So anywhere that they need help lying flat, you can add extra pins, and then all we need to do is add the ribbon bows to the top. Starting with a 28-inch piece of ribbon, you are going to put the ends together, forming a fold at the center, and you're going to cut these ribbons in half right at that center fold. So now you have 2 equal pieces of ribbon. Holding those together, fold them in half and cut one more time, so that you have 4 equal pieces. And now holding those 4 together, you're going to fold them in half, but this time don't cut them. You're going to pin at that center point down through all of the layers of ribbon. Now flip this over and spread them out. Spread out all of those ends on the pin, and then one by one, you're going to fold each ribbon end back onto the pin until you've created 8 loops. And once you flip that over, you can see that you've created an adorable bow, and you're just going to pin this right on the top center of your ornament, covering the raw edges and pins of your band. Now we'll create the next layer. Now using a 26-inch piece of ribbon, you are just going to repeat those exact same steps to create a second bow. And when you flip that over, you're just going to pin it right on top of the bow you previously placed. And now with your 24-inch piece of ribbon, you'll repeat those exact same steps to add your final bow layer. And you can add that final bow layer right on top of all the previous bows. And now all we need to do is add a hanger. So with your 10-inch piece of ribbon or string or cord or whatever you want to use to add the hanger, you're just going to put the ends together and tie a knot. And then using one of your black pins, you can just pin right through the knot on that hanger string. And then you're going to pin this directly over the top center of your bows. There's a lot of layers to push through there, so if you need to protect your fingers while you're pushing that in, be sure to do so. And just like that, your basic star basketball ornament is complete. I hope you all really enjoyed making this ornament along with me, and I can't wait to see how all of your adorable basketball ornaments turn out. For more free Ornament Girl tutorials just like this one, be sure to hit the subscribe button below. Thanks for watching!